I will ask Jane Allen, who will be the moderator for this panel, to also make her way to the stage. Jane is a partner at Deloitte in Toronto and specializes in strategy and business performance. She will be joined, yes, absolutely. She is joined by Isabelle Fleury of Intel. Isabelle is the Director of Public Sector and Strategic Initiatives and is based here in Paris. Isabelle? Okay, we'll see. Joining them on stage is Dr. Thelma Paris, who has come to the summit from the Philippines, where she holds the post of Senior Associate Scientist and Coordinator of Gender at the International Rice Research Institute. I should mention that we could spend the better part of the 2 days on people's bios alone, so in the interest of making sure that you all learn a bit more about our panelists, please do visit our website for a more comprehensive understanding of who these people are. This panel will look at girls and women as the engines of growth, in particular in business, technology, and agriculture. The process for the panel is that once Jane has taken the panelists through a series of questions, and hopefully there'll be some debate and some provocative statements made that the girls can wrap their heads around. We will then go to the girls and have them present the opportunity for them to ask the first set of questions, if time permits, and I'm happy to say that we're probably the only summit in the world that runs ahead of schedule. Then we'll go to the audience. So please don't be shy. Please think about the presentations that the panelists give you, and please, again, we encourage you to be proactive and engaged. Jane, over to you.
Thank you very much, Farah. I'm delighted to be here moderating this panel on this very important topic. I come from the corporate world. I'm a management consultant with Deloitte, and part of my job is as our Chief Diversity Officer, where I am constantly dealing with and facing issues of equality for women at work, and looking at ways that we can promote the talented women that we have in our workforce and encourage them to stay and become partners in our firm. Now, in the business world, there's been some very good research that shows that companies that have a higher proportion of women in senior positions consistently outperform those that have fewer women in senior positions. Yet it's still a fact that less than 20% of senior positions in companies are held by women. Around 6% of the top earning positions are held by women, and I'm talking about Fortune FP 500 companies here. And there are many, many of those companies, 30% in fact, that have no women in senior positions. So I'd like our panel to address some of those issues. And these numbers play out across sectors. I believe that no matter which sector you look at, we're still looking at small numbers of women in senior positions, even though they are highly educated, talented. There are many reasons behind it, some of which are addressable more easily than others, but I'd like to talk about some of those issues with our panel. I'm going to begin with Isabelle Fleury from Intel. And Isabelle, if you could just tell us a little bit about your background, your work, and answer the question, if you will, what are the biggest barriers to this gender gap? What can be done to close those barriers?
Just to explain where I come from, I'm coming from Intel, that is a technology enabler, I will say. And I'm working in France with the government on societal programs. And you are here because the G20 is happening by now, and it is with the French presidency. And for the first time, the G20 has had a digital agenda. It is also because they have big challenge to solve. And that because technology is a way of to transform and to find new solutions to big, complex problems. And I think there is a lot to do between technology and gender problem. Because we need to change the game, to reverse the paradigm. And women, and when I look at you, I feel it is really interesting and empowering to see you girls, because you are starting from where you are multitasking, you have this kind of creativity that helps solving the big problem. And of course, first of all, what I think that we have to do, and Intel has been long investing in education program, and we've got more than 20 years, I would say, and 10 years very actively. We have learned first row, I would say, how the gender equity is really important in managing and solving this problem. So you told this very well, so I'm not going to get into the detail. But what I feel is sometimes we separate, the men are keeping in silo what is education and with technology. We know that technology is a primer to economic development, by example, but we keep separating education and technology. And we feel, as Intel, that when we ask the question, how are we going to cope with the global economy, the global challenge, and we have an answer, we say, she will. And she will, it's you will, that women that have got some of this power to make it happen with technology, because technology is a game changer.
What are some of the technologies that are going to be changing the game for girls and women? Can you describe some of them to us?
You know, getting on the internet first. If you look at Africa, by example, we don't have half the teachers that are needed to get first access in developing countries. So first of all, by enabling some people that got a basic education with some kind of laptop and educational content, you can empower them to be a good teacher and to give a first level of education. But then, if you go in much country, I think that getting more girls into innovation, into technology, what we call STEM, the mathematical things and so on, is what we need, because we need science to solve the big climate problem, by example, and the rest. And also, regarding entrepreneurship, when you want a girl, a woman to get a business, wherever she getting onto internet, she can get access to the world and partner with the worldwide leaders. So it is bridging the gap of the 21st century that is held by technology.
Thank you. Thelma Paris, we were chatting earlier about the role of technology in the work that you do at the International Rice Research Institute. Can you carry on that discussion for a moment?
First of all, I would like to introduce myself. I'm a social scientist, but with a background in agriculture economics. So my basic education is agriculture, wherein during those times, I was only one of the few girls who entered agriculture because of necessity. My role in, your question is in what ways technologies affect women. First is, well, I'm sure many of you have heard of the Green Revolution in Asia, wherein we have solved the problems of famine because of the increased productivity of rice. But then there were many critics saying that because of the Green Revolution, it has displaced many of the poor women because of mechanization or improved varieties. So I did a research to really understand why. And then now I'm leading a program which is called Gender in Rice Research and Technology Development to ensure that women be a part of the technology development. So we work with women and introduce technologies which directly benefit them. For example, labor-saving technologies like a simple rice flour mill or a rice flour, a rice mill, or a pedal thresher, or improved variety which can withstand drought, submergence, and salinity. And this also technologies which directly benefit them, because women in, as you have mentioned, Dr. Shetty, that in Asia, women provide about 30 to 80% of the total labor inputs in rice production. In India, you go to Bangladesh, they manage the post-harvest activities. So there are many technologies, for example, producing high-quality seeds. Using the mobile phones, they can benefit from this because they can talk to extension workers and ask what is the best fertilizer requirement for the plots, what is the best price so that they can sell their products. So we look for technologies which can benefit them rather than giving them more work in the field. Because as you said, there are discrimination. disparity in wages between men and women. And we don't want women to work in the field and get low wages. We want them to be managers, because in the future, they need to be managers to use machine rather than lose control of these technologies. So we do a lot of efforts. And also training the women. So training, entrepreneurship, in leadership, and also technologies. I think this should be in combination in also doing research and collecting gender disaggregated information for the World Bank, IFAD, and so forth.
Thank you. Dr. Shetty, the report that you did for World Bank, was technology and the role of girls and women one of the items that you addressed? Or can you speak to how easy or difficult it is to get modern technology in the hands of girls and women?
Sure. One of the things we do in the report is look at, this notion of gender equality being smart, leading to productivity gains. We ask the question, as the world gets smaller, as investment flows, trade flows, information flows increase, which is the world we live in, what is likely to be the impact of that? And one of the things we find is there are going to be great opportunities for gender equality. So that's item number one. An example is cell phones. So if you have men and women having different constraints in terms of mobility, ability to move about, right? A cell phone liberates a woman. She no longer needs to go, a woman farmer in Kenya no longer needs to travel to actually sell her produce. She can do it over the phone. And we've seen this dramatically in places like Kenya with regard to M-Pesa, which is a mobile phone-based money transfer mechanism. You basically do it on your cell phone. And it's amazing what that does for women. So that's point number one. But point number two is it's not going to happen automatically. So, we can't sit back and say, oh, we're in a different world, technology is out there. And that goes to a point that you made, which is you need proactive action on the part of governments to make sure that these technologies don't reinforce other biases, particularly with regard to time. To me, one of the most, well, I guess at one level I knew it, because I see it, in my own household, I see it in other households, is how women across the world are responsible for most of the care work and housework, irrespective of country. I mean, but as an economist, it's really comforting for me to see the data on this and to see that France isn't that different from Ghana. That even in a rich country, those roles are very deep-rooted. But what that means is that the binding constraint for women in every society is going to be time. And so one of the things governments can do is look for technologies and look for ways of proactively pushing forward technologies that can save time, because those will predominantly benefit women. But again, as I said, I don't think our judgment is that you can just wait for this to happen. It won't happen on its own.
And what about the role for business in ensuring that technology and technology gets into the hands of women and girls, but also that constraints are removed to other aspects of women and girls succeeding? Do you want to take that, Thelma?
Well, I'll give an example in our work in Bangladesh, where women there's so many constraints like purdah, and they don't have access to cash and so forth. So because I work in an institution where we introduce technologies, our entry point is a technology, for example, a rice flour mill. Because whenever you introduce a machine, the men take over. So what we did is, the challenge is how can they keep control of that machine and at the same time control the cash that they generate by providing services. First, we train them on how to operate that machine, to empower them, and also to train them to form a group. So it's a business, because we told them that if you want to keep that machine, you need to have some control, and therefore you should learn how to manage that machine. So they elected the president, who is the treasurer, who will take care of the electricity and so forth. So that is indirectly also educating them to compute how much they're going to. So we go beyond technology by forming a group, training, and also helping them some skills on business. I think this should all go together, because if we only have the technology without any skills, without how to use the credit wisely, because we have to give them credit, and also if you don't have any entrepreneurial skills, a project will ultimately fail. So I think this is a combination of all these activities, training, and technology. You have the right technology, and of course, support. The technical support comes from us, and also through an NGO, because the NGO can pave the way, because they already work with women. They know the rights of the women. We cannot work with the rights of women, because we are in research. But we work with the NGOs who pave the way for us. So that means they solve the problem, but we have the technical skills and capability to help them do business, because without economic incentives, they will not accept any technology.
Isabel, do you want to tackle that
Yeah,
too?
maybe, and I really agree with what you say on empowering women with entrepreneurship skills. But also in mature countries, technology or industry can do something about it. And it's about working on work flexibility and working on objectives. At Intel, by example, we've set telework as a total rule, whether you are a woman or man. And that's proved very efficient to women, because we have done it not only for flexibility of work, but because we are working on objective. It's not because someone is there and is showing a big face that you think is good. You have some measurable about it. And it has proven incredibly good and successful for keeping women talent and getting them up the ladders. And I think that's something that technology can help. That's just a decision of working on, first of all, measuring as well. Measuring at each level, so that you don't have glass ceiling for women to get up the ladder, but also making sure that during their life, and especially at maternity leave, you don't lose the talent of the woman.
Isabel, I don't know if you see this in your workplace, but we're certainly seeing that young men coming into the workplace as well are becoming more and more demanding to have flexibility in their work and life. And we believe that if you provide that kind of flexibility for women, then it's going to improve the workplace for everyone, and we'll have our young men staying too.
Diversity is everything. I think that what you're pointing out, it's also how you tap into the talent of the young people and empower them to count and to have their contribution matters. And that's exactly the thing, yeah? It's about it.
Dr. Shetty, were there any particular surprises in the work that you did, in the report that you produced? After all of the research and all of the analysis, was there anything that struck you as different than what you expected going into it?
I think the biggest surprise for me personally was, I didn't come into this as a gender expert, right? I'm a mainstream economist. I've done lots of different things. And I always thought gender was important as part of development. I believe Amartya Sen when he says that it's hard to think of development without gender equality as part of it, but I never thought it was as central to the discussion as I do now after having spent a year. And the reason for that is twofold. One is the fact that many of these gaps, as I mentioned before, just don't go away. I think one of you, I think it was you, mentioned that you study science. And so you look at what boys and girls, young men and women study in different parts of the world, and it's stunning. Even in Northern Europe, that paragon of gender equality, young women study very different things than young men. They're much more likely to study humanities, the arts, than science and engineering. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, and it may be all choice. But frankly, I would be really surprised if it's all choice, if there isn't a substantial amount of socialization that goes into that. I see this in the US. I see it in my daughter's school. In 7th grade, there is already a separation between boys and girls in terms of what they study. And going back to your point about technology, in a world in which technology is really important, in which math and science are really important, you're going to see this underpin continued differences in earnings and productivity between men and women. So these gaps don't go away. You're not talking about Malawi and Bangladesh. You're talking about Denmark and the United States. So that's sort of one reason why I think, and what that does for me is it suggests there's a really important role for government. It doesn't mean that government needs to intervene willy-nilly. I'm too much of a traditional economist to argue that. But what it does suggest is that these problems need to be looked at very carefully. So that's sort of one point. The second related point is that fixing many of these gaps is actually not that expensive. Okay, take excess female mortality. Huge problem. I mean, 4 million women and girls, many of them during childbirth, die too early. Now, we know what to do. It's not rocket science in the 21st century to reduce maternal mortality. Sulfur drugs were discovered 90 years ago. As I said, Malaysia and Sri Lanka did this when they were much poorer, 40 years ago. And yet, we have this continuing disgrace. Yes, what it means is politically it may be difficult to do, because politically it may be hard to get political support around something that predominantly affects women, and poor women at that. But economically, we're not talking about huge costs. So, as an economist, I'm used to thinking of trade-offs. My life is full of trade-offs. But here's a set of issues where there aren't huge trade-offs. And in fact, there are likely to be gains if you do it right.
How do you do it right? How do you address
well,
what seems to be
there
a
is a
simple
chapter
problem?
in the report on the political economy of this. And that is, at the end of the day, clearly where the rubber hits the road, right? It's how do you get this? And frankly, in a global report like this, it's very hard for us to say, here's the recipe, put in 2 teaspoons of this and 5 tablespoons of the other. But we can point to a few common things. One is social movements are really important, right? And social movements that include men are really important. I'm often asked, so where are men in this 350-page report? And I say they're sprinkled right through. Because in most societies, going back to this point about differences in voice, the levers of political power are controlled by men. So unless you get men to be part of this movement, to both prioritize as well as fix problems, nothing's going to change. And one example we give is how Honduras addressed maternal mortality. It was a male minister of health who decided it was disgraceful that his country, which was then at the edge of being a middle-income country, should have the maternal mortality rates it had 15 years ago. And he said, I'm going to do something about this. And he did. Second, so I think it's very important to get coalitions around this issue. And the private sector, going back to your other point, can be a very important partner in that, because it's in the interests of the private sector to do this in many cases. As you mentioned, the evidence is clear. There's a lot of talent there in 50% of the population. So they would gain from harnessing that. Women are consumers. There's an important sort of social responsibility angle that can be highlighted by businesses that do things for gender equality. And I think, again, where we see where things have changed and where they've changed quickly, I think it's where governments have worked with the private sector to bring this about. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done, and but at the end of the day, it is going to depend on country-specific things. But one of the things I'm struck by doing this report is how quickly things can actually change. Just going back to education, 35, 40 years ago, we all felt there were deep-seated norms in societies that meant that people didn't want to send girls to school. Boy, those norms were really easy to get over. It now looks, looking back at history.
I too was struck by your comment about the reproduction of gender inequality over time. Just my own personal experience starting in the workforce, there were about 50% women graduating from universities at the time, and you would think that things would change as a result of that. And yet I see young men coming into our workforce with the same kind of entrenched attitudes towards women, and I don't know that it's conscious bias. I think a lot of it is probably unconscious. So there's a social element there. There's a socialization element there that you've all spoken to. And I don't know how we address that other than through some of the things that we've all been speaking to. But Isabel, I think you wanted to make some comment as well.
Yeah, I think it's not, policy is very important, so not to diminish it, but I think also women need role models. And I think that's a very good sign that Nobel Prize has been given to 3 women acting in their own environment. And that's true for, by example, for STEM, for science. We lack role model in science. We have very few. You look at the school book, you have nothing about which kind of contribution women have done, because they have done by men. And that's what we try to do up there. I don't know if you notice it or not, but starting to show that we can act from where we are and that our contribution will matter is very important. Most of the women are just stepping back. And just to give you an example, that is really about this internal barrier that we're putting ourselves in. You ask girls in college to do some math test, but you call it a game, you've got equal result to a man. You tell them it's a mathematical test, they do 20% less. So this self-barrier is something that we need to challenge internally from where we are, each of us.
We find it very difficult to find a talent pool of women to come into technology positions in our firm. They're very highly paid, they're very highly valued by our clients, yet the proportion of women available for us to hire to go into computer and technology positions is low. I wish we could attract them, I wish we could keep them, but they don't seem to be out there. And we too are told that it's because in high school the girls aren't gravitating towards those subjects. And Thelma, did you have some comments as well?
Well, Philippines is always an exception in terms of gender equality because compared to other countries, because we start at the elementary. We change the books in the school because the traditional pictures, mother is working in the kitchen, the father is sitting and watching television. We have changed all that. And now the kids in the elementary school are taught how to do the work of boys. So the boys also do crochet and knitting and all that, and the girls also make, do carpentry. So we should start at the early age, because unless we start in our own homes, we proliferate, perpetually, these norms or gender roles. So we have to change that. And in the Philippines, it is not an issue in terms of equal wages and all that. But so it happens in Erie, where international, because I deal with, agriculture is dominated by men traditionally, but now there are changes. I come from a campus, it is a University of Philippines College of Agriculture, and there has been a change in the trend. More girls are now in agriculture because in the entrance exam, they fare better. So now these girls are in the non-traditional courses like forestry, engineering, civil engineering, and other courses which before girls were not there. So it also creates a problem for employment, because if the girls are now in forestry, that means the men have to learn how to behave. So these are some of the changes where in a male-dominated occupation, the girls are now there. And also in Bangladesh, in India, there are more women now in science. So what we are doing now in Erie is to encourage young girls, interns, to come to Erie, spend 2 weeks or a month, and to be exposed to poverty, to our villages, and they make a report. So that's for the young girls who are ready to go to college. And then another step is that we have a program in Cornell University because our goal now in Erie is to breed the young scientists. So you're a scientist, I heard. So young scientists, not to get rid of us, but to breed young women scientists. In fact, last time we have an award for 20 young women scientists, so that they can pursue their career in science. They can be a plant breeder with scientists, engineers, and so forth. So to retain or to help them, we also provided environment. We have a room for breastfeeding mothers. We have a school in the institute, and we provide also jobs for spouses, because the men get the job and the women who are talented will just become housewives. We don't want that. We want to tap on their talents. So we have a lot of policies, and because men are in the senior position, we need women. So we now have more women in the board of trustees so that they can also change the policy. So we have to start at the political, management in the board of trustees to make a difference, and then management in the senior position to have more women. So before we have only 10%, but now we have exceeded that. And we have leadership skills, which I initiated for young women to take over our place, because now there are less women in the senior level, mid-level position who are in research, technology, development, and so forth. So there are many changes now going on, and I'm now sort of optimistic that change will happen if these young girls will also pursue their career in science, I hope.
Can I just pick up on this point about changing what society expects? I think part of it is the science technology thing, which is obviously relevant to all countries. But in developing countries, it may be something even more basic than that. And there's a very interesting experiment going on in Kenya that shows how just providing two things. So one is what it does is it provides girls with vouchers for training. And second, but it does so for occupations that are not traditionally female. Things like welders, carpenters, things. So it's vocational training in things where women are traditionally underrepresented. And second, it provides information to those girls about the returns to vocational training, about what wages can they expect to earn, etc. Huge impacts. So again, an example of what seems on the surface like a very difficult thing to change, where men and women work, this notion that some jobs are male jobs, and yet very quick change based on providing information and providing training. So a combination of those interventions. And again, it goes back to one of the points I made earlier about there are a number of areas like this where I think it would be worthwhile for us to learn more about what actually works, and then to take it to scale and replicate it in different countries.
Before we open it up to have a broader conversation and questions and answers from the audience, I'm going to ask a difficult and probably unfair question, because we're dealing with a massive issue here with many facets to it and no one answer. But I'm going to ask you, if you had to choose one action that you think would make a difference in closing the gender gap, taking advantage of all the incredible power that girls and women have, what would it be? I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think this gathering is about the G20, and I will ask a G20 leader to make access to education and technology together a fundamental right, something that we need to measure and that we need to follow, and get them together, because it is empowering women to make the deepest changes. Then, just like the Millennium Agenda, working not only on this, measuring this, but also empowering them into economy and into government, because there is a fantastic discrepancy between the level of education and the level of empowerment in the government, even in mature countries. It's really lagging behind.
And girls, keep these in mind when you're thinking about your communique. Thelma?
very hard question because so many obstacles. But if one thing that I would like to do, I've been attempting to do, is get all our male scientists to go to the field and really witness how the women work. Because they cannot really understand, how these women feel and the labor, the difficulty in getting out of poverty. If they are all staying the whole day in their computers in the office, so what I did is I tricked them. For example, if I gave them cameras and say, why don't you take pictures of women out there in the field? And since you're already there, why don't you ask them questions? What do you think about the technology? Will you accept a good variety? Why will you not accept this variety? So if I can get 100 scientists to go to the field, I think I can make a big difference. To listen to these women and to make the technology, to ensure that technology are adopted by the women, because the women are the pillars of food security, nutrition security, and so forth. That's my dream. And also to empower women on how to produce seeds, quality seeds, because they're totally ignored in the total agricultural development. That's still a dream, and I think it will happen in the next 3 or 5 years.
I think, okay, first of all, one of the messages of this report is there is no silver bullet. And part of it is countries are different. If I were the president of DRC, for instance, the Democratic Republic of Congo, the single thing I would do is improve women's security. I mean, that's the scandal. The scandal in the DRC is about, and you see it in the numbers. The numbers are very clear. There's huge amounts of excess female mortality, which is related to the lack of security. It's about, yes, economic opportunities, but hey, it's first about keeping women alive. But in general, I think where I would come out is, and one of the things I've learned from doing this work is that access to economic opportunities unlocks a lot of different things. Now, it's complicated because it's about multiple constraints. It's about time use at home. It's about laws on asset accumulation and the like. It's about the way that markets work. But the one thing I think that would be helpful in most contexts, particularly in informal and rural settings, I think is to improve the ability of women to accumulate assets. And that's not just a question of credit. It's also a question of inheritance. It's also a question of being able to protect their assets once they've built them up. It's about savings instruments. It's about training. So I think that's something that, and it's something where, again, I think we need to learn more about what works. I think one of the things we show in the report is microcredit by itself is not enough. It's not a panacea. It's great where it's worked in places like Bangladesh in sort of moving women forward, but it's often hits a brick wall because women can't grow beyond that level, and so those productivity gaps remain.
It's an important point to say that the answers to some of these issues are very context specific, and you've all provided some very, very good answers.